Hi everyone. Okay, I think that's working. Can someone confirm if this is also working on YouTube? Okay, can someone check YouTube? And I'm not sure why YouTube is showing something different though.
Oh, it worked.
Maybe double check that. Why is there... Like on Twitch for some reason it doesn't show a screen yet, but I don't know. On YouTube it does, I think. Same symbol? How come on my end it shows like a chart? I'm seeing a chart.
Twitter on here now.
Weird. I don't know. That's strange.
On Twitter.
This is also a test run too, by the way, because I'm trying to stream on a different...
Do you want to start streaming on Twitch in 2024?
Like, what is that? See? Like, I don't even know what that is. So what's showing up for you guys on... on YouTube then?
On Twitch in 2024?
What is that? See? Okay. Well, no, it's not lagging. I think YouTube does lag a little bit more than this does. Okay, I think they're both working though now. I think so. Like, I'm pretty sure those are both working. Okay. Well, as long as they're both working, it doesn't really matter. I just want to start like streaming simultaneously on both platforms. And because sometimes people complain about the Twitch platform, sometimes people on other platforms. If I'm already streaming, I might as well stream on both. Plus I have triple, I think, the subs on YouTube, so it makes a bit more sense to stream on there. But if you guys are all good to go, then we can kind of get started here. I think it's pretty straightforward for the week ahead. We kind of opened up a little bit flat, a little bit less than I wanted, which I think maybe could imply a little bit of volatility, but 1, 2, 3, 4, this is the fourth bar, right? So, and remember how on Friday I said that they could stall 64.25, 64.26? Do you guys remember that? On Friday, they did exactly that in after hours. And I am pretty sure when we looked at max ranges for Friday's session, they were a little bit closer to the 25, 26, 25, 24 area than they were anything else. So yeah, they were like right back in here. Do you see this? 2575, like that seemed a little bit more likely. So, and that's exactly where they ended up stalling. So I would say conditions are probably similar. Let's get back to here maybe. Let me just close this. make sure the screen is working. Everyone's up on there. So okay. This is a Sunday, like, I don't know what that's even about, but anyway, let's do this actually. Okay, so the main goal for this past week was that they tried to sustain. That was really the biggest point, and I feel like this was the really big area. We had risks down to 62.12, 62.20, 62.38, 41. I'm not going to explain those again because we've talked about them quite a bit, but the idea was if they sustained above that and kept it in an inside range, which was above the channel, that would give us the best odds of negating trying to get back to the zone, because there were odds they could have pinned us in this zone, correct? Like around 63.05, 20, so on and so forth, or 6335. Or take us over core areas, and that would give us the best odds of repinning our pinnable price points between this range here. Everyone's on the same page before we get moving, because apparently you guys were not on that same page. Apparently last week's report, people had no idea that we were resetting the pin, which is kind of blowing my mind that a majority of you said that you had no idea that that was the case. But is everyone on the same page before we get started here? That was the entire theme for last week, with some odds of getting an outside break if there was pressure applied on the 7th. Okay, the 7th had the highest odds, and because they couldn't quite give us that break on the 7th, I made it pretty straightforward that what they ended up doing, because they pushed the range down and back tested the channel down and then stalled 2.6, it's pretty obvious, right? Like, so the range they pushed us down was about 39 points. From opening range right here is about 36, 38. Do you see what I'm saying? So overall range, though, from like these highs this past week, let's say even if it did trigger like 39, okay, they could have stalled 6.6. Does that make sense? If they did this off the opening range, which was about 36.5, they could have stalled 6.3, 6.4. Do you guys understand this concept here? So this was the reduction in range, let's say. Let's just go with this. This was the reduction in range. This was the implied range. And sometimes the reason that they do this is because if they know that they're going to stall or fail, so we had some odds of taking out, 5.8, but we didn't really have super high odds of taking out 6.8. Does that make sense? So the odds seemed closely aligned to like 6.3, 6.4, and this was the overall reduction in range that we had. Let me know if that makes sense. That's the first thing that we need to just make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay, so that's why there was a lot of pressure applied for that day, but instead they ended up pushing it down, which reduced the range on the week. And this is how we would have had our retest. Okay, so that's where the range was reduced. But they still brought it back to core ranges, which still brought us back to that same odd, right? They still brought us back, right back to core, which puts us right back at these odds of coming back and retesting our 64.05, 64.20, 64.24, 28, 33, 36, whatever, okay? Those are all the same conditions. So this is probably the most crucial point here in terms of like the resets that we had, which I will include in the report just so you guys can see that. That was the reduction. Okay. Let's get back here. So that was the main thing. The main goal was to basically try getting back over here. We had some odds, but the pressure was intense. Unfortunately, Range was reduced and recycled, repinning core ranges and putting us back in the zone. Okay, I feel like this is pretty straightforward. This was likely done to avoid failing an all-time high retest and stalling in the means. 64.58, 64.64, 64.66. If everyone's on board with that, then we can move forward. So just let me know. If you're on board with that, we can move forward. If you're not on board with that and didn't know that we were recycling ranges or resetting odds, then you should probably go back and read the FOMC report. Go back and read FOMC report from 3-4 weeks ago. Okay, so the 7th had back tested all the way back to the channel. We even had odds of pinning 63.05, 20, 63.35, correct? Everyone's aware of that we had odds of pinning here. That was part of the reason why the report had some of these ranges. So I would say that odds are a little bit favorable for the week. Based on where they actually held, which was the mean, so we can say mean hold. And this was 6248, 6251. I thought I copy pasted that. This is what gave odds of 63, 68, 63, 71, 63, 78, etc. So again, that's just basically the 128 point range off that area. So 62.51 plus 128 takes you back to 63.79, right? 62.48 plus 128 takes you back to 63.76. So you can kind of see that they definitely had odds of that range there, okay? Or like holds means, wait, so like mid channel, upper channel, hold, lower means. Okay, so I think this is what we said. It was the 62.44 area. And this is what implied these ranges here, 6.3, 7.3, 7.8, etc. Okay, so this gave us an odd of getting not only a zone entry, but it gives us odd of getting what? This is actually on the midweek update. I just didn't include it in here. What does this give us an odd of getting? $6,500, 6503, 6508. Everyone's on board? That area there. So, does this mean that we have an odd this week of getting this? What do you guys think? I would say yes. I don't think we need to put this back in here because these were just the conditions that we had, but we'll just recap it. So we did sustain there. We did retrace there. These were last week's Sunday conditions. We did re-enter the zone. They did pin these areas. This gave us odds of the zone retest for that day. So I feel like this is fine. You probably don't have to leave that in there. This was very important. We prefer getting that inside range to net us back to 63, 57, 63, 68. And potentially back to the zone. Okay, so if they, let's say, failed. Okay, let me just go back to this. I'll give you guys an idea. So, because we did have two odds, okay? If, let's say, they actually had failed. Let me just reopen this. Can you guys see that? If they had failed this area here, okay, on the 7th, and they brought this back down, okay? Are you guys listening? Assuming they did something like that. We definitely had odds of repinning back around here, 6335, 6300, 6305. Do you get what I mean? In terms of like getting back to this area here. This is where they would have potentially taken it back to that. So we had odds of pinning down here, or it was basically a battle of the two zones, which is what I kept telling you guys on Thursday. So basically they could have net us flat back here, right? Maybe even 6335 or the previous zone, or put us back to this area here, which sets us up for the zone retest, right? So still, this was the condition, so we can just take that out. End of week conditions for the week was we were setting up for pins, okay? So these had the highest odds. This was before we reversed when I set these conditions, but these technically had the highest odds, okay? I know it was maybe a bit confusing for some of you because we reversed back, but it really isn't that confusing because they ended up stalling 64, 26, 75. Like, I feel like they would have had to clear and break above 64, 28, 64, 33, 36. You get what I'm saying? To get that full break. And now do you see why there was so much pressure on the 7th and why I kept saying there's pressure on the 7th? It's basically a tug of war between that zone and that channel, getting into that channel, because that's where we want to get to, and that previous channel. So the fact that they held the bottom of the channel at 63, 34 is giving us an odd of getting to that upper channel of 6, 4, 3, 3, 6, 4, 3, 8, 6, 4, 4, 1. Do you get what I'm saying? 6, 4, 4, 4, etc. So I think because we sustain that channel, that odd is favorable. It just is going to depend on where we hold, I think. So let me just, okay. So I would say this was definitely met. What do you guys think? I would say this was definitely met. So pinned at 64, 25, 75, I think, on Friday, 25, right? 25, which was not bad, but does put some pressure for the Sunday session. Okay, and it doesn't necessarily mean pressure in terms of where we open, but at least where we sustain. Okay, so if able to clear, this was the zone area. Okay, if able to clear overnight, it seems most likely to trigger a zone to channel for the 7th. All right, and maybe Nestor end of week. They weren't able to fully clear, especially off open. I think that's when we failed that spot. So when we had stalled, I think that 9-3 area, if you guys remember, on Friday. So let's go back here. When they had stalled that 9-3 area on Friday, or Thursday, sorry, that's when I had said that I highly doubt that they'll take this back because they really had to hold 9-3, okay? And it's crazy because that 9-3 ended up being our 33, 34 point range, okay? So these conditions from the report, okay, so they were able to clear. That gave us odds, but they had to sustain, right? So the area that you have to clear is going to be the same area that you have to sustain. Does that make sense? So failing 60, and I said it in real time on Thursday, failing 63.93, 63.96 on Thursday put us at risk, okay, of back testing. So that's where the bigger risk came into play, I think, is when they failed that area there. Does that make sense? And looking at the high range and where they stalled, I feel like that does make a lot of sense because that would have also been the ranges that we needed. And if they had made, like, basically broke a little bit higher here, like above 2.8, above 3.3, then that means they would have had a higher chance of sustaining like 9.6. So the higher the break, closer to 64, 28, 31, 33, 36, etc., I feel like we would have sustained a little bit higher here. But that 9.396 failure here is really where the risk came in, and it makes sense. That's where the bigger sell-off started to occur, and I think you guys can see that from here, right? And if you measure from there, that 6.3 like retracement back here was also just as important. Okay, and I think the big thing here is that they basically sustained that 66 point ratio from these areas. Like they never took it beneath that, and I think that definitely put us at an odd, because that little offset in range, if that makes sense, is kind of the offset that we had here. So like if they had broke to, let's say, 2.8, 2.9, these areas here, whatever it was, I think we said 2.75, 3.5 points or so. I feel like this is what helped us sustain. So they couldn't break high enough, okay, above like that 9.6, 9.3, but they were able to sustain. Does that make sense? Because if they would have brought this a little bit lower, do you see what I'm saying? Like close to here, let's say 66 points, that's when we would have failed off these ranges here. So I feel like that's kind of what offset the risk on Thursday and helped us sustain. But we were definitely playing with fire in that range there, especially off opening range, because we had opened at 64.07, I believe, and already had breached beneath that 66 point ratio. But I feel like that's kind of what bought us that little bit of room to work with. Okay, kind of like this, I guess, is how you can also think of it, or like 3.75 points, and that's probably like the 68 point hold basically. So if everyone's okay with that, we can go back here. You guys good with that? Let's go back. I don't want to talk too much because I do want to save my voice this week. So we can say able to clear, but unable to break 6.4, 2.8, 6.4, 3.3, causing us to fail to sustain 6.396 in real time. Increasing volatility. This was relative to how much range we had overnight and where we opened. So again, if we had opened closer to like the 64.20s, right, 64.30s, whatever the case is, I feel like we would have had a better odd on Friday. And again, that could be like the difference in range reduction. So we can probably just take that out. That was definitely not required. We had some odds for that, but and a minimum structural reset for open close. So I would say we reset real-time open at 64.0750 versus 64.04, 64.06. Do you guys agree with that? Let me know if you guys understand what this means, by the way. If you don't understand what this means, it's pretty important that you do. Okay, so at the minimum condition, if they couldn't break on the 7th, is they at least had to reset their open close conditions for structure. Okay, do you guys understand this concept? You can just say yes or no. If you don't understand it, I'll explain it. If you understand it, I won't explain it. Okay, I'm assuming everyone understands that, so I won't go over that. Basically, it's just a reset for that real-time structure. We had a better open for real-time compared to the previous weeks when they had opened around 06, 04, 03. I would say we had a better close at 7-3 versus versus 6-9, 70. Okay. So a little bit better. Odds can be extended through the 12th, 13th. Okay, I would say that we definitely got better closing points. What do you guys think? Because we did get like slightly better. Not better than like 2-9 or 3-1. But we did get better than that 2-4 area. Like it wasn't like great, but we like on what day was that? On the Monday it was 2-4-50. On the Tuesday it was 2-4-2-5. Oh, 2-5-50. So I guess it was like I don't know if it was better or if it was the same. So what do you guys think? I think that this was not technically better, but it was the same. A better pin since it was at 64, 24 or 25.25, but still still can keep odds in play with slight increase, right, in range. Maybe they can just slightly increase it. An even better reset would be a 44-point structure. They definitely couldn't do that. This was the odds that we had for the reset. Was they had to minimum reset this and clear ideally 64.0750 by real-time open. This condition was met. That's exactly where they cleared at real-time open. Cleared 64.07 area at real-time open, allowing for a 64.25 pin. Okay? And I even gave you guys a visual for that. So this had a pretty decent odd. Okay, and 25, like this was the area. I feel like they just kind of reduced it a little bit in real time. So these were the, and then this is the conditions that we could start again for the week. So I'm gonna reset some of this because obviously some of this is not gonna be as similar, but I would say this would have been more ideal, right? Being ideal. So a flat open near 64.22, 64.26, 64.28 area keeps us net neutral. So even though it's a little bit lower, because where did they open us today? 6.42275. So what, 2.5 points beneath? So I feel like we can still have some of these areas applicable this week, but this is, I would say if opens above 64.22, but beneath 64.29 area, it becomes very important that we sustain. What do you guys think? So they didn't open us as high, so that puts pressure for sustainment, correct? You guys, I don't have to do this on a Sunday night. Like, if you guys are not going to at least participate, then there's no point in streaming, to be honest. Because then I could just record a video talking to myself and post it. Like, if anything, I could just do that. Okay, anyway. I feel like since they opened us a little bit lower than I wanted, we probably need a pretty tight day on Monday. What do you guys think? Since Monday the 11th is the day before the flip, the 12th isn't really a flip on multiple frames. It's more of like a structural break. It is a flip on the 8-day, okay, but it is a calculated flip. So I feel like if they're gonna keep odds stuck until the 13th or the 12th, then the 11th is like, so far this doesn't look like they're gonna come and retest these highs based on this. I would say that the 11th probably is gonna have to really try holding the line. What do you guys think? And I think probably at least within that 64-point range, 66-point range. So like maybe we have some strict conditions back to that 6296, 6293, but maybe ideally this time above 63.99, 63.05. What do you guys think? Like, I feel like that makes more sense. Let me know what you guys think, because we're setting the conditions together. I feel like that would make more sense. So if opens above there but beneath there, it becomes very important that we sustain 6393, 6396 this time around, with 6399, 6406 area being more ideal. Okay? This can give odds of the 6458, 6468 retest at a minimum. This is still the same. This would still be the same. I mean, we do have CPI this week, so, and PPI, so I do feel like we could keep these ranges in play this week. What do you guys think? Yes. Yes, exactly. Like, basically, that's a perfect analysis, Super Gal, is like, because usually they keep it zone and channel bound before major releases. Does that make sense? So maybe they want to just kind of keep it tightly in that range, right? And especially since we have odds for the 12th and 13th, the 11th might kind of stay stuck. Does that make sense? Like within the zone, maybe entering the channel. I feel like if they can sustain the zone this time and then enter the channel, right, for the 11th pins, then that would give us pretty good odds. And that would give us like a little bull flag on the daily too, right? Like a 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth inside bar, slight exhaustion. Does that make sense? 5, 6, 7, maybe expansions. Everyone's on board? So our mock could look something like this. If this just stays kind of tight, maybe we get the break on this day with the, and then maybe we get slight continuation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the 7th is the day that they could either exhaust, expand, consolidate. Do you get what I'm saying? So I feel like this could be a really good example of that for this week. And I feel like we can keep these ranges the same because we haven't really changed much in range, right? Like 64, 22, 24, 25 versus 64, 25, 26. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the ranges haven't really changed. So we could probably leave this the same. And I would say the dates August 12th and 13th are extremely important flips because they're also calculated. This would all remain the same. This could be the daily 3-bar, 4th bar on the 11th, consolidate, CPI flip on the 12th, 3-bar continuation. That's one. All right, so conditions to kick off the week. I would say overnight conditions, we have to probably sustain the zone, ideally above 6388, 6391 with 6393, 636 being vital. Much better if we hold above neutral ranges. Okay, so I would say neutral ranges like of 64, 08, 64, 12, 64, 14. Closer to bull neutral ranges of 60. Because these areas were really calculated last week, right? So I feel like they will be again today. 64.19, like these areas, do you guys remember from Friday? These areas there? Like, I think this will be better if they can hold this calculated range that we had from Friday. Well, we can afford risk back to 63.99, 64.06, 64.12. It would be best to try and test upside areas first near that 64.33, 64.36, 64.38. Okay, so those could be some overnight test. 64. Let's put 6429 in here. Does that sound good? I'm just changing some of the conditions a little bit. Since the means generally implies volatility, we will trade this week with caution. Also expect range to occur. I would say this is only the case if they bring it to the means before CPI or PPI, which I don't think would be the case unless they did on CPI, like if they brought it to 64.50s or 64.60s, like on the 11th and didn't break higher, right? This would be applicable if we were brought to the 64.50s, 64.60s during CPI and did not expand to core areas. Okay, 6471, 6474, 6478. Does that make sense? If they took it into like 5864, something like that, and stall, that's also something that could imply volatility. So we'll be cautious for that, because that would be a volatile scenario, and based on where we open, that could be the case. Does that make sense? Because where they opened us, you guys, could give us some risk of volatility, okay? Because even though it's in a core area, it's not like the best area for like a core range, okay? Because it could still, you know, stall this range here. It's still enough to maybe give us that break, but from a 44-point range perspective, do you see that? They could stall 6675 from here, okay? From like 34-point perspective, they could stall that 5758 again at 56. Does that make sense? Do you guys want these visuals, or are you guys pretty straightforward on that? Like, it basically could just stall like 58. They could stall 68. So that's the risk here, is like opening here could definitely stall these areas, right? This may be applicable opening around 6422, 6424 area, as that implies 6458, 6468 stalls with 34, 44 point ranges being more aligned with 645650, 6457, 6466, 6467. Okay, let me know if that makes sense, but anyway, that's where the risk comes in. Core areas had the highest odds to occur this week. Okay, the previous one we had, so by the 12th, oops. What happened? By the 12th or 13th, this implies 6,500 break. I would say, since it's a 6422 open, 6422, that's closer. This implies a zone entry, okay, of 6488. Basically 66, 68 point break. So I'm not sure if they'd give the 6,500, but we definitely have some odds of getting at least a zone entry this week. Does that make sense? And then from there we can kind of see top 6420s. From there we can kind of see. Downside range, I'm going to keep this the exact same. I don't really want that much downside this week. Like last week, I feel like we could have afforded that. This week, I feel like we can't. Does that make sense? Like last week, we could, because the odds weren't that high and it was the mid-interval, we could afford going all the way back down. But I feel like at this point, we can't. So I'm recycling some of the conditions from the FOMC week, which makes sense because it was another big week that they take it to a zone or channel, right? So I'm kind of just recycling some of this. And I feel like it makes sense recycling this. So downside range for the week would be vital to try to sustain the zone early on. Do you see how the conditions are still reset? With sustainment above 64.10, I would say that with conditions above 64 14, 64, 17, 64, 19 being a little bit more ideal this time, okay? And maybe we could change this even to like 64, 94, 96, 64, 12. In the event core areas are taking down, we can go as a little bit lower, maybe 6420.50, 6422. Okay, since they opened a bit lower. Wider downside range would be aligned with that calculated area. I would say, so if we could probably leave that the same. What do you guys think? Maybe we could go a little bit lower. It'd basically be 128 points from top range. So if top range is around 5488, 5490, 128 to 132 points would be like 6360, 6354. Like maybe a little bit lower. Does that make sense? Just because of where we opened. So we could probably use some of this, but obviously holding core ranges would be better, right? So like maybe if they opened us lower, holding a bit higher would help us. Does that make sense? If we open lower, like which we did, closer to 6422, 6424 area, it may be beneficial to instead sustain core ranges to keep odds favorable and reduce the risk a little bit, giving us an offset in range to upside instead. So basically, if they hold higher, right, then they could maybe take it higher. So this would mean sustaining 64 or 63. What do you guys think? 63. I would say 7.4, 6.3, 7.650. Like those calculated areas, 6.378, 6.379.5, 6.381, right? Okay, I feel like that makes sense. This would be the bigger break. Okay, so we could say since they... Does that make sense? And last week we opened in the means. This would be like core to core. Does that make sense? So we could have a core to core break this week, either way. Ideally, if we don't sustain the zone above... $6.388 area, it'd be best to try to avoid the means. I would say that this is probably the same. It's basically what we had here. Okay, so I would say this is just a report, so honestly I'm not going to share all of it because some people watching are not even paying for the report. I'm just kind of going over it, but if I was just going over the conditions. If we don't sustain the zone, I would say if we don't sustain above... If we don't sustain above 6.388, it would be best to stay. I would say if we don't sustain 6.393, 6.396, my 9 area, it would be best to try to avoid core ranges. Avoid lower core ranges and instead sustain closer to 63.81, 63.85, 63.87. Okay. Basically like a slower upper core hold. Basically an upper core hold on a lower core open. Okay? Alright, I feel like that's it. I feel like we should be ready for the week. I don't really see any major differences. I feel like some of the areas that so that's why I figured the Sunday report might be a little bit, not shorter, but a lot of the odds are kind of the same, to be honest. So if you guys are all good, the report is out. I'm gonna try getting some sleep here early. Let's see where we're at. So far they've already tested 13 and 12. So, I mean, oh, and they tested 2.9. I didn't even see this yet. Oh, so that's good. They already tested 2.9 and 2.8. So, okay, I think this is good. I feel like because they at least tested 2.9 and 2.8, this should help us. This is probably that 3.25, 2.5 point offset. What do you guys think? Like, based off that shitty open that we had. Not a shitty open, but not like the best open. So this could give us some odds in offsetting risk. So I would say that risk is already offset because they tested 2.875 in that 2.950 area, because these were the areas that we needed from the week before. So I really want to see if they can try holding. I mean, I would have preferred that they held 16, 17, but technically speaking, we have room down to here. So maybe because they did test 2.829 this time. What do you guys think? I think now that they tested here, we'll see if they can hold this for the overnight London session. Okay? That'll be the goal. So these conditions could be for the London session. See if they can hold this area here, like this area here. Okay, that's going to be the overnight goal for London session, because if they can hold there, then we have we have odds to test here. Maybe the like a little bit higher, like the, and then that way maybe we can actually open in the channel tomorrow. And then maybe it just ends up being a tight day in the channel, I don't know. But I feel like that's going to be best for odds. So those conditions definitely would be intact right now. If they obviously hold off the 2019 area, like right here, then it would have to kind of just stay tight above the bull zone and give us some odds of retesting here. But we definitely could afford some room overnight between here. But hopefully they keep it in this like blue box. This should be a different color. I don't know why that's like that. Hold on. This area here. Okay, this light blue box. Alright guys, I'm gonna shut this stream off. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully we have a really good week this week. I feel like odds are on the table. I don't know if we'll get the 6,500 test this week, but I mean, we do have CPI and PPI. And we'll be prepared if they definitely want to back test down again. If that's the case, then at least we know that, like, based on where they opened, if they want to take down those areas this time, technically speaking, we still had some risk that we could afford from the week before, right? So it's not like it would just be the repeat of the previous week's low ranges. This is just in case. So that would be like, you know, the 60, 210, 20, those would be like mass downside ranges in the event that, let's say, they failed 63, 60s, and 70s, okay? We'll just kind of keep that. And if they fail 6335 and they fail 6320, 6305, I feel like some bear scenarios, if they, let's say, fail to hold this, and I'm just going to give us some scenarios because you just never know with this market. Let's say they bearish engulf. Let's say they bearish engulf and go all the way back to 63, 69, okay? And they go all the way back down here. Let's just say that we're just going to make a mock scenario just in case. Let's say they bearish engulf, take us back to here, take us back to 6.6, take us back to 6.5, okay? Then there's risk, right? Like if they stall this area here, that's why testing 2.9 right now is very important and upside to reduce the risk of this downside, because technically they could bearish engulf this because they already took out the high. So if they did something like that, then these areas obviously would still be back at risk, but maybe they just take it back to the previous zone, because you know how I say that they usually take it to a zone or channel. So if they do something like that, let's say, okay, let me just make this zone here so you guys can see it. If they fail this zone this week, okay, and they fail to break out of this zone and take it to the channel, because you guys know that they usually take it to a zone or channel, okay? Like everyone is well aware of that, correct? Before like a major catalyst. So we already know that one way or another, they're gonna try taking it back to a zone, okay, or back to a channel. So if they did something like that, that's how you could retest the previous lows, okay? I feel like that is how that would be a scenario if they did do something like that, if they took it back. But I would hope that they would probably avoid that and instead try keeping it in this zone and channel. But technically speaking, that could be an odd. So if they did have a bearish engulfing or something like that and reverse this back down, right? Let's say, and maybe they make like a star reversal and then hold like core ranges here. I'm just giving you guys a bear scenario because it's always good to have two scenarios, okay? Let's make this like just a flat scenario, okay? Like let's say they fail to hold and close above 7.1, 6.3, 7.1, 7.4, whatever. Okay, they could do something like this and then maybe pop it back on the 13th. Does that make sense? And bring it back to the zone or channel, and it just kind of like keeps us flat for the week. And this would be the case if they felt like they had a limit on range based on where they opened. And then it seems kind of shitty, but sometimes they do this and recycle us down to pin us back higher. So like maybe if they couldn't pin us higher last week, this would be a pin us higher this week scenario, okay? Where they bring it down, give us like a nice star reversal pattern, maybe take it back to the channel or zone before release. Maybe they hold a better area in this zone to then take it to a better area in this zone, maybe end the week in the channel on Friday, like we wanted to do this past Friday. That's just one scenario, just in case. Okay, so we'll keep that. I don't think that that's a very high scenario, but we'll keep it on the table just in case. All right, I'll see you guys.